Hey, welcome back to my channel. My name's Lou. Sometimes I do game design, sometimes I do just designs for coloring books. Um, Sometimes I talk about online business and what different projects I have. But anywho, so the first video in the series was me just taking a hand-drawn sketch, putting it into Adobe Illustrator, and then kind of going in and making the outline that will be used in Photoshop to give it different some different styles, different effects that can be used for like a shirt, right? For like a shirt, buttons, magnets, you name it, stickers, whatever. So this is the second part to this. So let's just jump right into Photoshop. And here, uh, Photoshop has a few different ways that you can import some files. So what I do is I just drag and drop the files into Photoshop. And here in the previous video, I exported either with a transparent background and a white background. The first thing you want to do is you always want to duplicate your background. Because when you just drag and drop them, it creates just the PNG file. If you edit anything, it will go ahead and save it over. So with a white background, the reason I did it is because you can either use the wand tool, select the background and delete it, or you can go in and uh, you can use the Control D to deselect what you've selected, um, or you can go in and uh, uh, what is it? You can go in and sorry, I'm having a brain fart right now. But anyways, you can go in and here I just add a new layer with black background, and then use the select and then color range, and you can actually use the eyedropper to select the type of color you want, and there you can just go in and delete the background. Right now, before you delete, you always want to feather it a little bit. I'm sorry, not feather. What I did here, I sort of feathered it, and that was not what I was wanting to do. um but if you notice, there was like that white outline, so you want to go in and modify and then extend it by 1 pixel, and then as you see, that white background or the white outline is no longer there. Here what I do is I just invert the outline, right? So to save yourself some time, just do a transparent background, create a new layer for a background color, and here what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to um, I'm going to go ahead and use the marquee tool to make a kind of like a circle or oval depending on the effect I want, and then I'm just going to feather it. I would say 25 is a good start, or 25 pixels, and then go in, use the cloud filter. And if you don't see anything come up, it's because you probably haven't changed this. If it's black, it's just white, or if it's another color, so you can always go in and just change it back to black and white. And then what I like to do is I also like to do a second effect on that, to go in and do like a second cloud effect. So here I just put the cloud effect on top of the background layer, and then I just do a different cloud effect, which gives it like this strong type of um, strong type of outlines, I guess you could say. Uh, and you always want to play around with it. You always want to play around with it and choose different effects. Here, I just add a little bit of noise because I wanted to go for like um, a starry type of like background, like space. And then I just go into the levels, and you always want to figure out the shortcut keys that they're gonna save you time. So Control L, I believe it is, for Photoshop if you're on Windows, and Command L on Mac. So, and don't forget to save. So always save, because you may do something or something goes wrong. Another way to add levels without permanently changing things is going to like a layer layer mask. I believe it's layer mask or just the layer effect. Again, I'm not an expert with Photoshop. I just know how to do certain things. Um, and here, what I like to do is I just like to add layer on top of layer, and I go in and do the same thing where I add a feather and for the select, and sometimes I up that and I do the same thing, right? Clouds and then different clouds. Sometimes I add a sorry, not distort, noise prior to doing that, but always do the clouds and then the noise. And again, you can always play around with it. This gives you like a starry type of effect. Um, and when you play around with the levels, it makes um, it makes the darker darker and the lighter lighter depending on how you move it. If yeah, if that makes any sense at all. Um, and then what I do is just expand it so that it gives you the um, bigger stars, technically, quote unquote. And then what I do is I press Control and then I click on the layer that I want to create a selection for. And here I press Control I to invert it, and then I go in and start using different effects on that layer. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Or sometimes it works out the way I wanted it to, and sometimes it doesn't. So, yeah, again, always play around with it, and that's pretty much it. I always play around with so many things on Photoshop. Um, Sometimes I get some really cool effects, and sometimes I don't. And here I'm just, like I said, I'm just playing around, seeing what I like, what I don't like. And one problem that I have with Photoshop sometimes is that when I try to do an effect and I'm recording at the same time, it doesn't actually show up as it should. So what I do in those cases, I actually sometimes close it and then open it up. Here I'm using the brush, but selecting like a fade, and then you can also press Alt and then drag it to, like, I believe it was left click or right click, and then just drag it to change the size, and then go in and select the colors. Um, I like doing this effect because it just looks nice, or at least that's my opinion, right? I like how it looks, and then I go in and do the same thing for a different color, doing different thing, just playing around with it. That's again, I'm gonna say that a lot because that's the way I work. I don't always have an exact idea or a vivid image of how the design is gonna finally look at the end. It's just sometimes I just go in and kind of start playing around. Here I add a Gaussian blur and I mess around with the level, right, with the effect and see what I like. So, and this is something you can use for a lot of programs out there, not just Photoshop. So these are just techniques, right? And as I mentioned, right, if you try using the clouds, sometimes it doesn't turn out the way you want it to because the colors just don't go together. So yeah, always change it. And then here, what I did was I added clouds, and I believe yep, added different cloud difference clouds, and then I go in and sometimes I do overlay, and sometimes I do like hard light or multiply, depending again how the effect looks, and always move the layers around because that'll give you a strange sometimes it gives you some strange effects and sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes if you duplicate it and just change the upper layer of the copy to a different effect or layer style, I guess, it will give you some pretty neat results, and sometimes it just won't work, so it's back to the drawing board. And yeah, so as I mentioned here, I'm just playing around with different things on the um, different, adding different layers, adding different effects, and like I said, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Here I try adding a mask, and with a mask, it didn't really turn out the way I wanted it to. Um, and one thing I wasn't noticing is that I had the layout. So I tried going in and choosing the select color by color range, and I was kind of sort of forgetting that Um, I had the layer in overlay instead of normal, so that I was wondering why it wasn't working. So again, this is you'll make mistakes. You'll make mistakes, and that's okay, and that's how you learn. So here I chose the select by color range, and I tried using that for the mask, and it just really did not turn out the way I wanted it to. Um, so I just discarded that effect. All right, and yeah, so it didn't really work out the way I wanted to. So here I just decided, I'll play around with the levels, and no, it didn't really turn out the way I wanted it. So again, it's just always play around with stuff, as I've said before. Always play around with different effects, and that's how you learn. That's how you learn on, and that's how you get better as well. So here, I just discarded um, that mask. So in the end, I decided to just delete those two layers and then work with the previous one I had. And again, always messing around with the layer style or layer effect or whatever it's called. Um, and I liked how this turned out. So I believe I actually for this one, what I did was I just duplicated it, and for that one I did an overlay, and then I wanted to see what like other layer effects would do, but I just didn't go with it. All right, and one thing I like to do is that if you press Alt and then in between two layers, it's going to it's going to use the bottom layer where as a mask, I guess you could say. So it'll give you some neat results sometimes. Um, and in this one, you can't really notice too much. But I'll use that technique here in a bit and change it um, to get the final result. So right here, what I did was I selected all these layers and then I grouped them together. Uh, Sometimes it's good for organization. However, in this case, what I did was I duplicated that group and then merged it, and then, as I mentioned, press Alt and in between two layers, and it's going to give you this style, where it uses the layer below as a mask. So it's really cool. It's a really good way to get some really neat results. Um, and then here, I wanted to try adding a new effect, and using the clouds and then the difference clouds and then the noise, I believe it was. Yeah, sometimes I add the difference cloud twice to see what effects it gives, and meh, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And here I do the same thing where I add the noise and then change the levels. And again, if you don't get the effect that you're wanting, like you see it change and then you click OK and it doesn't show up, sometimes it's best to like close the program and open it back up, or at least that's the problem I've had before. And again, I just go in and change the layer effects, um, to see if anything like it gives me an effect I like. And here I ended up liking the hard light a little bit, and then turning down the opacity on that layer, to see how it would work. And I also tried. So you can always go into adjustments, and I like to either use hue, which is also Control or Command U, um, to and it's a really quick way to change the color. But sometimes it just doesn't go with it. So here, what I did was I ended up upping the contrast and then upping the brightness a little bit, and it gave a little bit of better results. And then I wanted to see. Yeah, so another thing I like to do is I will also hide certain effects, and then here what I did was I pressed Control I to invert the color of the lines. Instead of black, they're white. Um, but I didn't really like the way the background was there, so I just decided to go in um, and in this case I kept playing around with the invert, which I ended up liking this design better and decided just to stick with it. Um, and I decided to ungroup that so I can do other effects with it. Although I did like this one, the hard light. It ended up giving a really neat design. I definitely liked this one. And then here, I believe I tried to add another effect, like using the brightness and contrast. And there again, it's not like using exact numbers. It's just going in and adjusting it so that you get the effect you want. Again, it's not being exact on certain occasions. Color dodge actually turned out really good. I love that one. Um, and so here, what I was pretty much just finishing up. I ended up just saving this one as a transparent background, and for this one is just same thing, export. And one thing I do is I use the smaller file, which will make the file size drastically. Um, for example, here you can see it's 2.8 megs before choosing the smaller file size, and then afterwards it ends up being, I believe it was, I want to say, yeah, it was like 800. Yeah, it was like 800 kilobits or kilobytes, which again is less than 1 meg. So it ended up turning out really good. Like this one, I ended up liking as well. Mm-hmm. All right, and so what I do is I export one design, And then I also end up exporting it a different way, like this one. Although in this one, I just decided to export it transparently, or with a transparent background. All right, so that is pretty much the Photoshop process I use. So this is going from hand drawn sketch to Illustrator to Photoshop, and yeah, I'll in the next video I'll actually use this design on a Redbubble product. So stick around for that. Go ahead and hit subscribe and like and share and all the goodies. And I will see you guys in the next video. Cheers.